I wanted to say something about this video, which comes in 3 parts. It's a long story about my father that I did, it looks like, when I was 52 or 53, which means it was in the early 90s. It was captured on a VHS tape. This is a rehearsal, basically, of the story that I did, as far as I can remember, or in fact, it may have been one afterwards that I did to make a record of it, because I only gave 1 performance of it, as far as I can remember, maybe 2. But it had no video record of it or no oral record, and I wanted one just for the hell of it. So I happened to find this one in the library of the old Sarasota Poetry Theater performances, and it's just one I did in my house at the time, as far as I can tell, and so it's pretty steady, one on. I've tried to do some editing of it in terms of using some visual techniques, so it's a little bit easier to watch. And I think that makes some sense too, because it is a long story and it's hard for us to listen for a long time. This happened about in the very dark area where I was starting to think about doing an oral poetry, a spontaneous oral poetry, like the kind that Homer did. Nobody knows how to do that. There are no books on it because nobody understands it. There's all kinds of theories on it which are completely crapola. I found out later when I learned how to do it, which is I just rediscovered how to do it along with some other poets. But that was vaguely in the back of my mind, but it hadn't really reached that stage of forming anything yet. That the thing that really brought it to the forefront was I wanted to do a story about my father, because I knew I was forgetting him. And in fact, I didn't want to do that, even though we parted on bad terms, if you want to call it that way. I wanted to say something about him, and I wanted to draw a picture of him, create long stories without doing any memorization whatsoever. That is, if you went to the right opening door, the right opening scene, that it would automatically lead to another one, and when that scene closed down, it would lead to another one, that the connections were all in storytelling memory or in the unconscious. And you didn't have to worry what scene led to what door. It would happen, and over a series of retellings, like strings on a bead, those beads would eventually come out in the same order, although they were always subject to a new bead appearing, because there was always a need to perfect the story. In the same way as you perfect a joke that comes to you spontaneously, and you tell it, and you kind of twitch it and tweak it a little bit. But after a while, it pretty much stays the same. Although you might put an inflection in here or there to change it. Well, the old oral poets, which essentially were storytellers, because that's how the unconscious discloses itself in stories, whether they're dreams or whether they're the waking dreams we call poems. It comes out in a story, and it comes out effortlessly, and all the connections are made for you. That's the thing that, in fact, amazed me as I started to tell this story by speaking it out loud. That was the first insight I had, but it wasn't conscious. Something came to me and said, speak this story out loud. Don't write it down or just think about it. Just start to speak it. And I remember at the time I was in San Francisco in a motel out on a freeway, and one of those freeways where they have a side road and there's nothing there, just grass and weeds. And I started to walk up and down it to the roar of the passing cars, and I started to speak the story out loud over a period of 2 or 3 days, and I realized that the story would form itself. It really didn't have to do anything, and that if I let it go, that each scene would lead to another scene, to another scene, to another scene, to another scene. So when I came back from San Francisco, I essentially had a pretty good sense of the story, and it pretty much formed its way. And it's pretty much the way that the great oral poets worked in Homer's time and before him. Although the rhythmic language was much stronger, when I finally told this in front of an audience, a poet I knew who I think probably sent to me when I did in front of an audience, which I have lost, said there was a rhythm to it. And of course the rhythm comes from the unconscious, which always wants to speak rhythmically. It wasn't quite what you'd find in a poem, because it's looser. It's a story, as in you'll see in the 6-beat line of Homer. It's a much looser structure, but there is a rhythm to it. And I found that the length of the poem is no problem. It takes care of itself, because really what you're dealing with are scenes, and the scenes will beget scenes, will beget scenes, will beget scenes. And in any good storyteller's mind or unconscious, that happens. You just have to have the insight and the nerve to let it happen, and not really worry about how it's being formed. So finally, I guess after some time, I decided to give a performance publicly, and I didn't know what the response would be, but I found it was quite good. So I think what happened in this story is it gives, from in fact, the reaction I got from people who were there and went on for a long time, we're talking about 25 minutes, I think, 30 minutes, is that because it had that soul to it, it had that undersong that was beneath the particulars of myself and my father, that many people reacted to it in a very positive way, as though it were their story. Because the stories we have of fathers and sons, like the stories we have of mothers and daughters, aren't that far apart. I don't care whether they're from China, from here, from India, or from 1920, or 1600, or 2010. It doesn't change much. The particulars might change, but the understory does not change. So that's what I think is very valuable about this as art, is that it gives a emotional portrayal of the give and take that's involved between fathers and sons, and you can translate it easily to mothers and daughters, although its flavor will be slightly different, perhaps, but again, not far from the tree, and then on top of that is the particular story that could be of interest to my brothers and sisters and their kids, because we're now talking down a couple of generations. As I put this onto YouTube, I make a final movie of it. So with all that said, I'll say also that, in fact, I like the other videos I've made of old movies of the family. Whatever I've done, I'm going to do a more artistic one of this one, because it is a work of art, more so than the others, which are just old family pictures, which I put together in a new medium, computer video, just to save them from their Super 8 age or their VHS age, and it's a more durable format. So that I think it can be viewed by people who don't know the family, who don't know me really, or in fact I don't know my father, but for those who happen to know us, I think it'll bring back a lot of memories, and some of them may shock you and some of them may move you. But in just listening to it, I thought it was a pretty good portrait, and I found also it was much more of a portrait of me than I thought at the time. So you think that you're going to be different from your mother and your father, but as you age, and especially if you're filmed a lot, like I am, and you're recorded a lot, you can see that in fact you may have run around the block when you came home, so all of your things that you think you've done differently, you haven't done that differently, and that the faults of your father are your faults, and the virtues of your father are your virtues, and there's not much difference, when you get down to it. So I say that as a caveat. It's something that when you tell stories about others, the thing that you reveal most is the story about yourself, and I was willing to do that. I'm glad I did it. So here's a story. I hope you like it, and I hope it kind of works its way through into the inner parts of your being, or it'll take a little nest there, maybe come up in your dreams once in a while, like all good art does.